are you ever having just sessions of jumps? So what would that week built out look like?
We're on the track 4 days a week. We have 2 active recovery days, which is like biking and like body weight circuits. The people that I coach, they're lifting somewhere between 2 and 3 days a week.
Jonathan Edwards, and like, who do you look at as like the best technical jumpers with that could carry the speed the best and hold the best positions? I've always heard he had a big clean. I don't know if he squatted. I don't know if he did anything else.
If you can't clean 1.5 your body weight, like you're just not doing enough in the weight room. I think Jonathan Edwards at his best was almost cleaning almost 2 times his body weight, which is like pretty, remarkable.
We're going to talk to the coach of the most explosive Olympic champion, and we're going to start right now. So we're about to start a podcast talking to the coach of the 2024 Women's Triple Jump Olympic champion, Thea Lafond. Aaron Gadson coaches Thea Lafond. He's coached Jordan Scott, who's one of the best triple jumpers in the entire world this year in 2025. And Thea also was an indoor world champion. And what we're going to do is we're going to talk to Aaron about triple jump training. We're going to talk to him about the strength behind it, the speed behind it, how it's genuinely the most explosive sport in the entire world, and then how you guys can take these lessons and apply it to the realm of sports performance. So we're going to pick his brain, we're going to analyze all these factors, and then we're going to try and see how we can use this for our everyday athlete. We're going to start right now. Okay, Aaron, so I want to tell this story right away because I was coaching the men's shot put at the Olympics past year, 2024, which, by the way, it's crazy. It's been almost a year. But as I'm coaching, your wife and athlete, Thea Lafond's up on the screen, right? And I'm watching like, oh my God, she might actually win this freaking comp. And I remember it had started to rain, I think, second round, maybe. But following that, I'm paying attention, I'm watching. She ends up winning, right? And I want to share this with the audience and the fact that we've known each other, I think, since 22, if I remember correctly, like where we've first formally started to talk to one another. And one of the things that I've loved like watching is where you tend to train. Like it's like you almost have like a fly by night setup, like nothing, like you see these big time college universities, they've got everything behind them. They've got all this funding. The coaches or you'll even see NGBs funding entire countries. And in your case with Thea is, she's from a small country. The country has never had a medalist, never, really on the grand scheme had never done anything at the Olympics essentially. And watching her win, not just that first medal, but then winning the actual freaking Olympics. And after winning the world indoor title as well, for me to see someone that I know, first of all, I remember being like so amped up and like seeing you and being like, you did it, like holy shit, you did it. But I think the coolest part about that is just like seeing still where you guys are. You're still just working. You're still working in like a corner of a cricket gym, and I think that's one thing that I want to put out there, and it shows to me that you can overcome those the lack, in theory, the lack of assets with good coaching and good execution of everything. And I wanted people to just recognize and to see that. So I guess I want to know, like from 2016 on, like what did you see in Thea and what are the biggest things that you maybe have worked on as like low hanging fruit along the way?
Yeah, man. You touched on a lot of stuff there. To answer your most recent question around kind of what did I see with Thea and what do we do, I think at the time that was like the first time I'd worked with somebody kind of her caliber. I mean, at the time she only was jumping 1340, 1360 ish, and for people's context, like that's not world class. That's kind of like really good in college, maybe all American. She actually was never all American in triple jump. But she, like, had she done that at nationals, maybe she could have been All-American. So it was like about All-American-ish kind of number, not a winner, not a medalist type thing at NCAA level. So she really had a lot of work to do. And the reason why she went to the Olympics in 2016 was specifically because of this rule around, like, if you're from a small country and that's the only person that you have, you can bring somebody. And so that's how she went to Rio. she didn't actually hit the standard. So anyway, as far as kind of what I saw with her, I think I really saw it as like, hey, there's a great opportunity of somebody that's at a higher level than I've coached before, and I'm just trying to get her better. And so I think that she just had a lot of technical flaws that I saw. I think she was like reasonably strong. I think her clean at the time was like 185, for example, which is like pretty good for NCAA. But she also had a multi background, so it's not nothing crazy. She was really aggressive, which is a great trait to have, but when you're doing technical stuff, you can't just be totally aggressive either. And so I think really the first things was like really cleaning up the running technique and the jumping technique and making her be more technical focused as opposed to just like aggressive only, aggressive first. And you know, within kind of 6 months, we were able to get her to actually qualify for the World Championships, which is generally harder to qualify for than the Olympics. And at that time, we were literally training in hallways, like with a rollout runway, and like on a high school track that was like pretty beat up. So
So
yeah, man,
when you're what place did she get in Rio?
literally last place, 30. I don't know, 32, whatever, however many they brought, 33.
So I did know this already, and I wanted to use that as like, to me it's like she gets last place in Rio, and then you go Tokyo, then you go a couple world championships later, and all of a sudden she's the Olympic champion. I think it's like, okay, that aside, how are you looking, or what are you looking at as far as running technique, um, slash jumping technique? Walk us through, um, as far as like the actual technique and the phases of the jump. What are you looking at with each phase of the jump, like approach to the takeoff, and then each phase as concisely as you can?
Yeah, so I think there's always going to be some benchmarks, right? So you have speed benchmarks. You're going to have benchmarks, obviously, like how far did the person jump? How far can they do? Different testing things. If it's like a standing long jump, standing triple jump, a fly 30. So that's a running start and 30-meter run, all those different types of things. So like I knew from some of that data that like one of the first things they do is kind of just do those battery of tests. And like she just didn't really, like, her power levels weren't very high. She wasn't very fast. From just a technical standpoint of like the running, it's like she's very much interiorly tilted. So her chest is forward, her hips are kind of rotated downward. She has a lot of back kick. Um, and so that's just really an inefficient way to run. Um, and then as far as triple jump stuff, one of the biggest thing from triple jump standpoint, like someone there's three phases, and so if you have a hop, step, and a jump. If your middle phase is really short, that's usually like a major red flag that there's something going on there. You should have your distribution should be something like 35, 30, 35, or somewhere between 30 and 37 for the hop, the first phase, and the third phase, and the middle phase should be around 30%. A lot of women tend to be under 30%, sometimes even like 26%, which is really low. And so again,
On the
for Thea,
steps.
yeah. And so for Thea, I think she had some of those characteristics, and a lot of that comes from, if you're running, you're interiorly tilted in your run, then your hop's going to be interiorly tilted, and that that position is not a very efficient and powerful position, and so that doesn't allow you to create a lot of I was going to say force, but really like impulse. So force times time. You're not going to be on the ground very long. You're not going to be able to exert a lot of force, and so your time interval is smaller, and the force you can generate is lower because you're not engaging, all of your posterior chain on that contact. And so it just makes it so that you just have this tiny little phase. And it's just not efficient, especially when you compare it to men. So men, I would say, generally have a much better phase distribution. I think it's just more naturally easier if you're stronger. But for women, I think their technique has to be dialed in a little bit better because they can't just kind of muscle through phases.
So what are you looking at? I'm thinking through. So and you're actually the one who's, this is a cheat code, is talking to you about the speed stuff with Rojas from Tokyo, and you see like her max. So her top speed in Tokyo on the runway was faster than Elaine Thompson Hera's top speed in the, at least from a miles per hour or kilometers per hour clocked. Rojas ran faster than Elaine did when she won the Olympics in the 100 meters. And I guess where I'm going with that is, like, if you think about her, or mainly I'm thinking about Thea, is what are you looking for? If because I also think about, from a football perspective, or even starting off on 100 meters, right? There is this like projection forward, but it seems like because of the run in on, like the flying 30 might be a better carryover, or at least a better demonstration. What do you want to see posture wise as they're going uh to lead into the hop? Like when they plant there, what do we want to see with their torso, their hips, their knees, and everything?
So so yeah, I mean, I think the point that you bring up is pretty interesting. Like Rojas is really just an incredible athlete as far as like what she can do. I mean, usually when you see women that are 6'3", they're usually pretty awkward. Obviously, there's some great, volleyball players and basketball players and things like that, but your typical 6'3" woman is like pretty, slow and clunky and uncoordinated, and Rojas is extremely fast. And so, could she beat Elaine in the 100? I highly doubt that, but like her top end speed for over, let's say, 10 meters is arguably, some of the best in the world. And that's especially true, I think, when you're fast and you have that such a large, stride length. It's kind of like Bolt, right? Bolt was really fast too, obviously, but he had such a large stride length. His when you compare his frequency to other people, it's so much lower because he's almost taking like 9 feet per step, which is just insane. And so, um, for Thea, coming into the board, what we're really looking for compared to like maybe an elite sprinter is your posture needs to be a little bit more upright. I think you can see from a really elite sprinter, they're going to be maybe a little bit crunched up. It's going to allow them to kind of engage the hamstrings maybe a little bit more. But in the triple jump, because you need some vertical, triple jump is really about how do you um, the trade-offs between horizontal and vertical velocity. And so for your hop, you need some vertical velocity. You need to trade some horizontal for vertical. And the only way that you can do that is by making it such that your body is more upright, or in some cases maybe even a little bit farther back. And that's, you see that in high jump and long jump in particular, right? They have this penultimate step, and then like even in javelin, you got this penultimate step, and your hips are going to be, have some angle towards it's such that you can kind of get that vertical projection. And so in triple jump, I wouldn't say you necessarily have a penultimate. There are some jumpers, especially in Cuba, that have more of a penultimate and they go really high in the hop. You can do that, but the challenge with that is the higher you go up, the more eccentric forces you're going to have to deal with on the other side of that. And that if you don't handle those well, then that means your second phase is going to be small and you're going to lose speed and things like that. So again, I'm looking for her to come in there with good posture, pretty tall. That last step's going to be a little bit longer. It's going to, you're going to have your foot's going to roll as opposed to kind of just more like, be quick off the ground, because you need that rolling, that little bit more length in front of your center of mass so you can be on the ground a little bit longer and generate more impulse to push off of the board.
So you would be rolling from the heel?
Yeah, I don't necessarily think that you cue it that way, but if you were, to slow it down, you look at it, that would be the difference between that step and a typical running step.
Okay. All right. So if you're saying, what do you think it is with women, if we're looking at the hop versus the step, and the most women might be, instead of being 30% on the step, the second phase, we're looking at, naturally maybe 26 to 30%. They're a little bit lower on that step when you're looking at it compared to the entire percentage of their jump. What do you think that would be like if you're testing somebody? What are the benchmarks that would show, like, yeah, that is indeed this benchmark is linked to this low step performance? And then on top of that, what are you then trying to do, let's say in the gym, versus what are you trying to do with drills or with actual technique on the runway?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think one of the things that I do that's maybe a little bit different than a lot of coaches. I think things have shifted, and I don't know if I can be responsible for that shift. But I do a lot of multi jumps. So multi jumps is like, triple jump is just a hop step jump, but a multi jump might be two hops, a step and a jump, or hop step 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 jump, or any different variations of hops and steps. That's not exactly triple jump. And the reason that I do those drills, especially in regards to what you ask, is like if you do two hops, the only way to get a good second hop is if you have a really good first contact. If that contact would lead to a short step phase, then it's going to be extremely difficult for you to get a second hop. And so it's just a way to it's a way to like force people to get a good contact without having to tell them like what to do. It's almost a way of having external cue or setting up the environment to get people to do what you want as opposed to telling them exactly what you want to do. So that's one of my staples is kind of doing hop, hop, step, jump, especially, you can add more intensity. You can do it off of a box to make it harder and things like that to really reinforce that contact needs to be in the right way because, if it's not, this drill is like not really possible. And I think that drill is really, really difficult for, say, like beginners and like high school kids because usually they go way too high and they're also not very strong. Um, and then as far as what you would do kind of in the weight room and stuff, like I, I look at the, I look at the weight room as a way to create like resiliency and the ability to survive the practicing and the ability to survive the season. And so like I don't necessarily look at lifting specifically as this is like performance enhancing. Like, hey, if you can squat this amount or you can single leg, or BSS this amount or whatever, that means you're going to jump super duper far. Like, yeah, I do think that there's a strength quality that's required because the eccentric forces are extremely high. But it's more that we need to have connective tissue that is strong enough and resilient enough that's going to allow you to practice the thing enough to get the skill to actually be successful.
I I want to come in here because I literally just had this whole discussion with Alex this weekend. So he was talking to me about a discus thrower, and he's like, "This dude still doesn't like to lift," and he's good. He's like one of the best. But I told him, so we were at Prefontaine, and Daniel Stahl's in the weight room, and he was deadlifting like 650 for like three triples fast. And I was talking with his coach, Stefan, and then Alex and I were just talking on a walkie-talkie back and forth. And I was actually like, "Look, I think there's a point, and maybe you can tell me if this is what you're saying." My argument was, I think as kids, like let's say you take a 13 to a 20-year-old, weight room work is gonna just explode their performance. It will be a performance enhancer, and then probably when they're like 20 to 25, it'll really start to slow down. And then, as they become elite or world class, it's the stability factor. It's like, look, if we can keep you resilient and if we can keep the structure together so that you're strong and stable, so that you can go throw a lot or you can go do a lot of triple jumps, so that we're minimizing the beating by strengthening your tendons. That's where the weight room work comes into play more so than like, we need you to, you know in the case of the throwers, like, we need you to bench press 500 for a set of five. No, we don't really need that anymore. We just need you to stay healthy so that you're able to take a lot of throws. Is that sort of what you're saying?
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean that's exactly what I'm saying. I think like triple jump, I would say is probably one of the hardest like events to practice because you can't get a lot of reps in. It's so you know punishing on the body. So like even if I've learned stuff from you just talking to you guys and stuff about like throwers, and you guys might throw, I don't know, making them 30 times or something. And,
Yeah. Yep.
like you would never jump 30 times in practice for triple jump. Like that's like
You could, but
suicide.
your shins and your knees would be slaughtered.
Right. And so it's just like because you have such limited, opportunities for reps, it's really important, I think, to be strong. And so there's some coaches, and I don't coach like this per se, but there are some coaches that is like, yeah, we just work on the speed and we do a little bit of bounding here and there, but we only jump like once a week or something. And like, yeah, if you have someone who's really freaky and fast and elastic and light, like I guess you can get away with doing that, but I don't think that's going to be super consistent, and I don't think that that's a way that you train someone that you're trying to get medals
Yeah.
for. You're kind of like
Yeah.
avoiding a major piece of it, and trying to like you know just brush over it with like just athleticism.
So with that being said, I was sort of when you were laying out like the multi jumps, okay, do you have because I was listening to that and I'm thinking the multi jumps that you're talking about in my mind would be like the way I think about a weightlifter, like if we do a no feet snatch or a low hang snatch or a high hang or a one box, those are variations of the competitive movement. And I would, I'm interpreting it that way from a triple jumper. Is like you're basically extending the triple jump and you're saying these are variations of the triple jump that should have a high correlation and they are maybe slightly better from a technical side point for a stance, or even maybe they're easier on the body, so you can do a little bit more volume on it. Is that the way that you would? Is that an accurate analysis of like the multi jumps?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's talk about like practicing like the whole event versus like part of the event and things like that. So I think this is like more of like that part kind of training where it's like, hey, I'm just working on the hop today, and the way to work on the hop is by using this drill that emphasizes these things, or it sets up this environment to make people contact the ground in the right way. Because I think if you actually just practice pure triple jump, it becomes a lot about like internal cueing, and and it's just like it allows you to really fall back into those same bad habits. But if you do a drill that's like almost impossible to do with those habits that you have, then it forces you to make those changes a lot quicker.
Mm-hmm. So, all right, if you're looking at, I was trying to think through this because I did want to go into a little bit of the speed discussion. Maybe that's what I'll do first. Is like speed stuff. You mentioned a flying 30. So if there's any football coaches out there, at least collegiate football coaches, they might be like, oh, flying 30. Um, what would you say, like from a speed perspective? Is it a flying 30? You're looking at a flying 10. I've talked to you about. I know you've radared the jumpers on the runway as well. Just I don't know if you do that randomly or not, but I wanted to see how many days a week would you be doing like classic speed work, and then what are those big things that you're looking at in that realm of the triple jump?
Yeah, so I do speed work about. Oh, well, I do like max velocity. I'm going to break things into kind of two groups. There's like max, maybe three groups: max velocity, technical running, and like acceleration work. So I do max velocity stuff twice a week. I do acceleration stuff, some form of acceleration, also twice a week. And then a technical will be like, will float. Like, so maybe I don't do max velocity twice a week. Maybe do it once a week and once with technical, and then another week I might flip that around or whatever. Um, but I basically, I'll have one day that's really, max velocity for sure. The other day of that week might be more technical running, depending on kind of their readiness, so how fatigued they are. But it also might be, depending on the time of the year, it might be, max velocity as well. And then I'll definitely have twice a week where we're doing some type of resisted running, which is really acceleration kind of work. Um, but you talked a little bit about this earlier. I don't have like a ton of space, so I actually don't do fly 30s because I don't have enough room to do fly 30s. Since wall to wall, my facility is about 50 meters. So I would do some like fly 10s. Obviously, our very specific stuff that we do would be like run through, so your approach. But if we're not doing approaches, they'd be like more like fly 10s, or um, yeah, we do fly 10s, or our technical work would be running over kind of mini hurdles. Um, and we also do sometimes certain parts of the year we'll do assisted running, so you have a cable that's towing you to really get you over, your actual, they're like supra max, so
Mm-hmm.
something that's above what you actually could run by yourself.
Okay, I want to go into that, but I want to see. So max velocity, you're going to do flying 10s. If you had more space, maybe you would do flying 30s, possibly. Technical running work, you're doing like wicket drills, is how I
Yeah.
envision that. Is that accurate?
Hmm.
What would be like another version of a technical run that you might be hitting?
You could do so different variations with like, early in the year sometimes they do like actually hands up running or hands up with a weight, other versions of like no hands. Technical could also be, using some of really light like resistance on the arms or the legs or the hips to really kind of emphasize that movement. So again, that's like creating the environment to get people to do what you want without telling them what to do. So we're talking about a pound or two in certain areas to really get them to feel where their body is so they can kind of be better at running. So yeah, it's really just variations of one hand, no hand, hands above your head, a little bit weighted, um, things like that to really emphasize hitting the ground well, um, and good posture.
And then acceleration work, you do resisted running or some form of resisted running. Like, would you do hill sprints or mainly just like a sled or cable?
I have this thing called Dynaspeed, which is very similar to a 1080 sprint. Um, it just can be integrated with some other devices. But I think hill running is great. It's definitely much cheaper than a 1080 sprint. I think the 1080 sprint is or the Dynaspeed is really good because it can give you like very specific data about how fast you are running at certain 1 meter, 2 meter, 5 meters, 10 meters. Um, my device also can allow you to do variable resistance, so you can start at a certain resistance and then as you run, you can get lighter and do different things like that. So when I do my resisted running, I usually have it start pretty high, and then as you run, it gets lighter, and I would do it in a contrast fashion as well. So I might like do two resisted runs and then do one unresisted. And the idea there is like, you're creating like a potentiation effect, but it's also like a neural, not, I don't want to say neurological, but it's really about ingraining the right movement pattern. So it's like, hey, you pushed out the heavy resistance really helps you find the angles that you need to push well, because otherwise you're not going to go anywhere. And then you bring that over to your actual unresisted run, and so you should have better running mechanics.
So in a weekly split, like let's say it's 2020. There's no COVID. That'd be great. Thea's weekly split. What would this look like as far as days a week lifting, running, technique work? And are you ever having just sessions of jumps, or is it like no matter what, like the sessions of like the plyometric work that you would do is like we're doing that on the runway no matter what? And what would that week built out look like?
So a typical week, um, we're on. Well, I'll give you the overview, but then I'll kind of go day by day. But we're on the track 4 days a week. We have two active recovery days, which is like biking and like body weight circuits. We have one full day off, and then Thea in particular lifts 4 days a week. The people that I coach, they're lifting somewhere between 2 and 3 days a week, but Thea lifts four, um, and really that's just I think her body likes to feel like primed or loaded. So like her lifts, it's not like she's not doing a ton of volume on all of those days. But she doesn't like to go days where she's not doing much. Like if she goes 2 days without doing something, she just doesn't feel good. Um, but as far as kind of how things would work out, so on Mondays we lift in the morning, and then we have a speed. About so 6 8 hours later, we'll have another session, which would be a speed day. So max velocity stuff. Then the next day, she'd lift again in the morning, and in the evening she would do um, jumping, and then finish up with resisted running. This is on the track. Wednesday would be an active recovery day. Thursday, she'd lift in the morning, do another speed session in the afternoon. The speed session is usually going to be more technical running, just generally because I think at that point in the week, the nervous system wise, they're just not be able to hit as high of kind of intensities. Um, Friday, she lifts in the morning, does some more active recovery in the afternoon or directly afterwards, and then on Saturday we just have a jump session on the track. Um, So that's how her week is set up, and we've been pretty consistent with that for the last at least 5 years or so.
What's up, guys? Our podcast and our channel are sponsored by our own strength training app, Peak Strength. The entire focus of Peak Strength is to provide you guys with the absolute best sports performance app that you could ever imagine. We build out the programs on the back end. We take in all of these different decisions that we learned here on site at Garage Strength so that we can then apply it to you so you can improve your training. So if you guys want to improve your overall sports performance, head over to peakstrength.app, the Google Play Store or the Apple iOS Store. Download Peak Strength. You'll get a free week of training, and then you can start getting on those gains, get those reps done so that you can become a champion. Now, let's get back to the video. Peace. What would be a lift that you would do, let's say day one before max velocity, 6 hours later? What would be like 2 lifts you might do in there?
Let me see what we do. 1 second. She usually, I mean, she does not doing anything super fancy. We've done some fancy stuff over the years. I don't know if it matters that much as far as like getting really, really deep into the advanced stuff. Sorry, I have too many tabs in here.
I just think like when I've talked to you guys in the past, it's like, yo, Thea's doing like a rack pull and then like hang power cleans or something like that. And like to me, it's like we would all envision this. Maybe this is where I get triggered by like the functional cults is like, I've talked to you guys, and it's like you might do a rack pull or something, or a deadlift, something similar like this, and then
Yeah.
a hang power clean or something that just like is a pretty standard fundamental movement, and then you're doing your jumps and your speed stuff. Like you're not doing, from what I'm seeing and what I've talked to you about, it's like you're not doing like
Yeah.
banded cartwheels for triple jumps.
No. So like I have her stuff pulled up now. Sorry. So like we do this is I'm just gonna go through just general list that we do, not necessarily super detailed, but like we do front squats, RDLs, step ups, pull up, hang clean, back squat, Bulgarian split squat, push press, hip thrust, and then like just like variations of that. So sometimes we might do clean pulls, we might do a trap bar deadlift, might do a single leg RDL. When we get closer to like major competitions, as you said, like we'll do rack pulls. We might do some jump squats or some like quarter squats, so like B stance, so like a kickstand kind of stance.
Okay.
Quarters like really heavy, but I see those like less about like, oh, these are like functional, more like, okay, let me do something that's going to be like less volume but still give you that kind of nervous system like hit.
Yeah.
And so it's really just like, okay, if we get this like minimal dose of high CNS activity, it's going to keep us primed throughout the week. But it's not like, oh, if we do this at 2 meters per second, like she's going to jump super far.
How far out from a chart the lifts would be? And I actually have in my notes, I think I sent these to you, was like the world indoor peak versus the Olympic peak. How far out from, let's just say a normal meet, not a peaking meet, a normal meet, would she be lifting before jumping? And then is there a difference between the dudes and the chicks?
So for a normal beat, we usually train through, like even for World Indoors, that when she won, she lifted the night before. She had
Well,
two.
that's where I wanted to bring that up because I remember talking to you guys. I remember talking to you. I think you might have even like just gotten there, like, oh, I'm still awake because Thea's got to go do like rack pulls or something, and she was competing the next morning at like 8:30 or something crazy. And I remember you had posted a video and you were doing the cable pulls, like you were pulling her with the cable by the pit. Do you
Yeah,
remember that?
yeah.
And and I was like, yo, she's jumping tomorrow morning. No, I think that's a different scenario too, relative to the Olympics. But I don't know, so that's why I wanted to see. Maybe that's just take us into that actually. Like just explain like what you were doing at World Indoors versus the Olympics.
Um, so I think for World Indoors is more of just like a deload as opposed to a taper. And so I guess the distinction that I'm making is that generally speaking, depending on the time of the year, like every 4 to 6 weeks there'll be kind of a deload week, which is just really more about roughly speaking anywhere from like 60 to 75% of like the volume that you typically would have. So you might take a lift out, take a day of the training out, and each one of those training days is going to be just like a little bit less volume, but keep the intensity up. And so, going into World Indoors, if I look at this, I think she kind of this like had maybe 10 to 14 days of kind of like a deload ish, but like the actual lifting didn't really change that much. But going into the Olympics, maybe it'd be more like, the lift changed for about a month, and then like 2 weeks going into it to the Olympics, things would change as far as that change lift and the deload. And so I would say that the reason why she lifted the day before for World Indoors because usually she does something we call just like potentiation,
Mm-hmm.
and so like 6 hours before she competes, she might do something like banded squats, like really heavy banded squats, contrasted with some like jumps or something like that, just to like be a kind of like a CNS primer. And so because she was competing like super early the next morning, I think the competition actually started at 10 a.m. I was like, okay, like let's go before you go to bed. So I think she literally went to the gym at like 10:30 p.m. or something like that. She just did kind of like this light lift. It might have just been like some like cleans and jump squats or something like that. And then, she went after it. Going into the Olympics, I think even in Tokyo Olympics where she actually had some really big jumps where she probably could have got at least a silver, maybe a bronze medal. Um, I'm pretty sure if I can go back, I'm pretty sure that she lifted the day before. Let me see. Yeah, she lifted the day before the Olympics in Tokyo and then competed that evening. Um, and then I think for this most recent Olympics, I think she did something similar, but because she could, which was like unprecedented, the prelims and the final were back to back days, and so I think we maybe backed off a little bit more compared to Tokyo because usually there's a day of rest in between. Um, but yeah, I think for her again, as I said in the beginning, she just doesn't like to be. She doesn't like to kind of just chill and do nothing. She needs to always feel a little bit of just like priming.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that I'm sure a lot of throwers that are probably like that too. It's not everybody. I think for men, they can be like that too. I think women allow you to maybe they give you a little bit more wiggle room because I think they can their CNS doesn't get taxed as easily as men do because they're not able to I think just like activate as many fibers and so they're not going to get fried as easily.
Yeah, they just they don't have as much muscle mass as a dude, so they don't have as much neural stimulation from a
Yeah,
session.
yeah. So I think it's something at the elite level. It's something you definitely need to experiment with because I think it can be really effective. Because when you're talking about 1 or 2%, like that can matter. And so
Mm-hmm.
you're getting that extra potentiation. That CNS firing up a little bit better. If that does that lifting the day before or the night before or a few hours before, do that. But you got to try it out. But don't try it out of the championship. Try it out early in the year and get that ironed out. But I think it can be really effective.
What do you think's been like the biggest rise with the Jamaican dude?
Are you talking about Jordan?
Jordan, yeah.
Um, my I think really this was the first year he was fully kind of locked in. I think he had the first year I worked with him, which was the Olympic year. He kind of had one foot in, 1 foot out, because he was doing some lifting from somebody else, and I don't think, he would do, you know, I've talked to him about this, so it's not a secret, but it was like he'd be like, "Oh, I was up till 3 o'clock playing Call of Duty or something like that." It's like, bro, come on. Like what happened? I'll look at somebody at practice, like, "What's going on with you?" He's like, "Yeah, I was tired, I didn't sleep well." I was like, "Okay, like what happened?" And they're like, "Oh, I was up late." Like, up late doing what? Like, what, you know what I mean? Like,
Yo, this reminds me when the first Diamond League final I was at was in Zurich, and I was sitting with you and Thea, and I was like, "What do you think was like such a big change for you?" I asked Thea this, and she was like, "Well, I don't want to sound bad, but like the first thing for me was I just stopped being fat." And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Well, I realized I remembered back to my college coach, and like I got all in until like nutrition and like recovering, because I realized like fat don't fly." He used to say that, and Aaron would talk about I got to recover better, and that's I worked on that. And I'm like sitting there thinking, and just like hearing Jordan Scott's he's the number. I mean, from what I remember, he's a number one guy in the Diamond League right now, like
yep,
jumping out of his mind. And basically, like, unless they followed you on Instagram, people would see this guy as like he just popped onto the scene essentially. But like you could see it sort of building basically from last year when you started working with him. That's my take on it. I don't know what you think about it, but it's like when you hear this stuff, it's like, what are you doing playing Call of Duty till 3 in the morning? I
yeah, and you got to wake up in 6 hours and go lift. Like,
and go jump too, yeah, and focus on your speed work. And it's like, what are you doing?
yeah, man. And so, like, I think again, I really think like we had a long, hard kind of conversation after Olympics about like, hey, man, like, if you really want to do this and like have a sustainable like profession and stuff, like you got to do these details. You can't just like go to practice for 2 hours and then do whatever the heck you want to do. You know what I mean? And I think that like a lot of people, I think, underestimate how important some of this stuff is. I just think it's a difference maker, and I also think that's like you already said it with Thea. It's like she's not the most talented. Like when you talk about, when I say talent, like genetically gifted and showed promise at like a young age, like she's not that. Like certainly, yes, she did well in high school and she did well in college, but when you talk about the world, there's young people all over the world doing incredible crazy stuff. Like, she was getting blasted at like under 20 championship, world under 20s and stuff. Like a lot of the people that she's competing against were way better than her, years ago. And I
Yeah.
think with her, it was like, okay, let's maximize your strength, let's maximize your speed, let's maximize your technique, let's maximize your nutrition, maximize your recovery, do all of these things, and year after year after year, get better. And I think she just maximized herself or optimized herself better than other people did. And if you go on the Olympic channel, like their Instagram, you can see what she looked like in 2016 versus what she looked like now. She like literally looks like a different person,
Yeah.
technically and like physically.
Yeah.
And I
The
think that's
hop
because
and just even like the way she moves when she's just moving, like when she's walking, her presence and her build is totally different. Like
yeah,
total, like, yeah, like it's crazy. And I think, not to cut you off, it's like it's so mind blowingly different that it's like, dude, she's just put in the work for 8 plus years. Like it's not something easy that you can hide. And if you don't do it, and to your point too, she never all American in triple jump. Think about this, like, so there's 8 chicks indoors, 8 chicks outdoors that were better than her all the time at the collegiate level. This isn't even on the world stage. So like that's a also testament. So
yeah,
um
man. And I think like it's just certainly I want to be clear. Like there's genetic gifts and talent matters and stuff, but I think there's another part of genetics that we don't talk about, which is like um, what's the word? It's basically like your expression of your genes, right? So if you're not in the right environment and you don't have the ability to express those genes, then you won't be able to see that talent, right? It's obviously it's easy to see, oh, somebody's tall,
yeah.
right? Also, epigenetics is the term I was looking for. So there's the epigenetics, right? So like you have to put people in certain environments for them to express their genetics, and there's a component of genetics of things like, certain people when they train, they get more of like, pleasure hormones than other people. So that means that person might just really like to train. And so if you get
Yeah.
somebody that's really engaged, that really likes to train, then they're gonna be able to get more of those gains, practice over practice, week over week, and things like that. And so it's like not just about what somebody looks like and where they are right now. It's about like actually, putting them in the right environment, giving them the right plan, and seeing what happens. And you just never know.
Yeah, 100%. I agree with that. Where it's almost like you look at someone like Rojas. If she grew up in the U.S., let's just say she would have probably been a basketball player, and like genetically, we would have never seen, or she may not have ever had the development of her speed component
Mm-hmm.
actually be released. Like the genetic expression may have never happened because her environment setup likely would have been geared towards just playing basketball. I'm not, you know,
Yeah,
it's just the odds are that way.
exactly.
When you lift, a couple people have asked me about you guys with velocity tracking, and I feel like Thea maybe tracks it better than you do, Aaron. What are your
Yeah.
with like the bar speed and stuff like that related to jumps and related to and even related to like speed on the runway?
So again, I don't want to, act like I'm an expert on VBT. But the way that I think about it, and I think about this in regards to other parts of training as well, is that VBT is about like accountability and intent. And so whatever part of the cycle you're in, like you should be trying to increase or maintain the velocity of the bar. Doesn't matter if you're doing reps of 5 or reps of 3 or reps of 1. You should be using that to hold yourself accountable to that. And so for her to say, okay, man, like, wow, that velocity really dropped. She's like, okay, I got to get this next rep going or this next set going. And that's going to allow you to make sure that the quality of your lift stays high and that people are continually, auto-regulating. Um, Auto-regulation in regards to making sure the intent of each lift, each rep is good, each set is good, but also saying like, damn, like my velocity was really low this whole session. Like maybe I need a break and I need to talk to coach about that, or I need to look at it and see that and say, okay, man, like your velocities have been low the last few sessions. Let's give you a deload or something like that. So I don't see it as like, okay, again, oh, your clean velocity was 2.5 meters per second. That means that you're gonna run super fast. Because I just like I haven't seen a clear understanding of like how anything in the weight room actually replicates any of the velocities that you might see on the track. So like that might not be true necessarily with throwing. Maybe there's some things you could do because the velocities are maybe a little bit slower on some parts of the movements. But like I don't know if you can say like, hey, if you clean a certain amount, you snatch a certain amount with a certain velocity, that means you're going to run really fast.
I think it could mean maybe you would have a better first maybe a better first step, first like your first um to a point. So the only thing, I mean, I don't disagree with you because the only thing I would say is like if you have a better pound for pound, let's say relative, like let's just say you clean as a dude 1.5 times body weight, your first
Mm-hmm.
step, maybe two steps will be correlated to that because the impulse is going to be similar. The time to put force into the ground will be similar, but then soon after three, four, five steps, the impulse is much shorter. So the time period would correlate more towards what you're doing on the runway or with jumps or anything like that. So I don't think.
Yep.
Um, Also, we would have to have the context of the age of the athlete, but like a 25-year-old person, you might see it on their first step. Maybe that's it.
Yeah, I agree with that. And so, you know, in regards to certain sports, so like let's say your football like a lineman or something, like maybe that would be like really, really relevant. For triple jump in particular, I don't necessarily care what your first step or second step velocity is. I care what your at the end of the runway what things look like.
Right.
And so that's not to say that that doesn't help or doesn't correlate at all to like the momentum you have down the runway and potentially give you a little bit more into your max velocity. So I'm not saying it's not useful per se, but I think that the faster velocities that you're talking about, the less the weight room is going to like actually directly correlate to those things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I agree with that. I think that's the interesting. What do you know about? I did want to ask you. We've talked about it a couple of times, but like if we're talking about like Jonathan Edwards and like what do you see in and maybe who do you look at as like the best technical jumpers with that could carry the speed the best and hold the best positions through technical execution? And then yeah, what would you? I've always heard, and I don't know if this is true. I've always heard he had a big clean, but I never understood outside of like he just had a really big clean. I don't know if he squatted. I don't know if he did anything else. I don't even know if any of that stuff's true, but maybe what do you see in those guys that you can look at for Jordan or for Thea that to build towards, and even the younger kids to build towards?
Yeah, I think there's like you touched on it earlier. I think there's a requisite level of strength that you need to have. Like if you can't clean 1.5 your body weight, like you're just not doing enough in the weight room, right? And so I think Jonathan Edwards at his best was almost cleaning. I think he was cleaning like power cleaning, um, like almost 2 times his body weight, which is like pretty remarkable. Um, and I also know like Christian Taylor. He also I think his clean. I believe it was like something like 350 or something, and maybe he only weighed 180 ish or something. And so, he also had clearly almost a double body weight clean. And so I know there's a
Dude,
lot
that's
of guys.
crazy. What a fucking animal.
Yeah. So I think you definitely need to be able to clean 1.5. And that's not a magic number, but it's like the weight room matters to a degree. Like if you don't have a certain amount of strength, you're just going to like fall apart.
Hmm.
There are some like young people that jump really far that have like really bad weight room numbers, but I think what happens if you keep jumping like that, your body's just going to fall apart. Um, but again, as far as Jonathan Edwards, I think that from what I've read, there's some stuff that you can find that has his like training program of the year when he broke the world record. It's online. You can find it pretty easily. But he was mainly just doing clean snatches, and he was doing like I think some half squats and stuff like that. But I think pound for pound, he was really strong. I think he had really really good technique, and he was really light. Um, and so I think that's something that you should. Those are all things that everybody should be striving for: being really pound for pound as strong as you can be, being really light, having really good technique. I don't think there was anybody quite as fast as he was, especially at his body weight. And so I think that makes triple jump a lot easier. But he also had the best technique, like I think by far. Um, there are some guys in the last 10 to 15 years that I think could have broken the world record. As far as like they had the physical gifts to be able to do it, and they had pieces of world record jumps, but technique is not stable enough, and it ultimately led to injuries, and those guys just didn't have enough time to break it.
I was just going to ask you, like, what do you think Taylor lacked, or any of those guys relative to Edwards? Injuries aside, was it the lack of speed, and then the lack of speed to hold, maybe to hold the? Is it the lack of speed and then the inability to hold that speed when they hit the board, or what is that? Which I guess would be technique as well. So, like, what did Taylor lack
I
that
think
didn't
I
get
don't
him to jump
think.
as far? Not
I mean, to
again.
be
We're talking
fair,
about one of the second greatest, arguably ever.
yeah, for context, like Christian Taylor jumped 1821, and the world record's 1829. And if Christian Taylor was perfect on the board, he would have broken the world record.
Yeah.
So like, I wouldn't say that Taylor lacked anything per se. He's very fast. I mean, you know, he's a guy that could run the 400 in, I don't know, 45 seconds or something like that, which is pretty remarkable.
All right, I forgot about that.
I think that part of it is if you look at he jumped 17 high over both legs. So he when he early in his career he was jumping off one side, then he got hurt, and then he switched and jumped on the other leg, and he also jumped really far on that leg. And so I think he lost a little bit of time because of that switch and that injury. Um, I mean, if I were to change his technique, I mean, I think maybe he relied a little bit too much on his last phase. Like his first phase was really he was really good at maintaining speed, but it was short, and so yeah, it was short, you know, hop phase, and he had a good step phase, but it's like you put everything into that last phase, there's only so much you can get out of that. And so because of Christian's build where he's a longer like guy, the torque. So when I'm talking about torque, it's like his legs are going to hit farther out away from his center of mass, and even if the ground reaction forces are similar, there's going to be more torque on the body. And so I think it's just harder for those guys to potentially be as aggressive on some of the hop, for example, especially with that type of speed that he had.
So
Um,
do
yeah,
you look at it like, okay, if let's say we get a jumper comes in, he jumps. Yeah, you're analyzing their jumps. You got the hop, step, the jump, and then basically you go hop. Maybe there's an umbrella here of these things correlate to a good hop. Step, these things correlate to a good step. Jump, these things correlate to a good jump. Then you work backwards, and then you say, okay, here's the pieces that correlate this, and then you look at the ratio, and it's like this is bad, this is good, this is really good, this is really bad. Okay, now let's take this apart. Let's try to do all the things to improve this part under this umbrella, and then troubleshoot it. And then that's basically like revisiting it. I don't know if you do it quarterly or something, you revisit it over and over again until you just keep chipping away at that low hanging fruit. Is that like a way that you do training when you're developing someone like Jordan or Thea?
yeah, I think it's similar to that. I I think what can happen with triple jump and probably, you know, many events is like there might be 20 things you need to fix or 20 things that
An issue.
are bad or whatever, right? But a lot of those issues are correlated, meaning that okay, if my posture is off on my approach, then that means the posture is going to be off in my hop, and then the posture is
Okay.
off in my hop, that means my step phase is going to be short, and blah blah. So it's like if I just fix the posture in my run, that's going to correlate to a good takeoff posture, and that's going to correlate to good posture in my hop, and that's going to correlate to a good step phase or whatever. So I look at it as okay, how what are the issues? What's the priority of the issues, and what do I think that prioritization? How is that going to you know solve these subsequent problems? So again, I think some athletes can be like, "Well, man, I got to fix my landing." And it's like, well, it doesn't matter if your landing is good or bad if your hop is horrible and like your run is slow. Like we
Yeah,
need to
yeah,
get you
yeah.
running well first. We need to get you jumping far, and then it's like, yes, the landing does matter, but let's fix the thing that's going to give you an extra 3 feet as opposed to 6 inches.
Yeah, it's almost like there's something more upstream that needs to get fixed, and it's the posture or the speed on the runway that could have a huge cascading effect downstream if you just fix that stuff. Is what you're saying?
Yeah, and so I think maybe this might be a flaw of mine, but it's like I'm pretty stubborn about stuff like that, and so it's like I don't want you to even think about or talk to me about this other stuff. I need you to just fix this first part first. Then we can worry about all the like little stuff or even like the sexy fun stuff. Like people want to worry about the 1% stuff. I need you to fix the 10% stuff. Like
Yeah, dude. I think that's such a I this whole year for me has been, and this is a short therapy session for me, is like conveying that message to the throwers, like I don't give a shit about where you are at the front, because that won't get fixed if we don't fix the way you enter the circle out of the back. And I think of that the same way on the runway. It's like, if this point and their takeoff here is sloppy, the way you land, yeah, we could fix it, but you're not fixing the actual root cause of the issue. And it's the same thing of like, how do you that's like the hardest part, is to get the athletes, like somebody who's more mature, someone like Alex, I can be like, yo, Alex is like, yo, I just need to be balanced on that left out back. And if I'm balanced on the left, the throw's over. I'm done. I'm going to slam this. Like, it's simple. It's really simple. But then to say that to, somebody who's just coming through, who's 24 or 25, it's like, dude, you're worrying about the stupidest shit because you get distracted by your squirrel brain.
Yeah, and I think it makes it even harder because you have like social media. So social media is awesome because, I get to meet people like you, right? But it's also a problem because there's some like losers online who just are saying stupid stuff. But it's also, you get to see what everybody's doing. And so it's like, wow, so and so's doing this, so and so's doing that. I heard on this stupid podcast that somebody said this other thing. And it's like, don't worry about that. Even if it was right, that's not you right now. So like, don't
Yeah.
even worry about it.
That's not you right now. That is like, that should be stapled on everybody's shirts. That's not you right now. Shut up.
Yeah. And so it's like I think it's really important for us as coaches to like, you know, we have to build that trust and build that buy-in. And part of that should be like, you have your pedigree and your accolades and stuff, and do like, hey man, like you're here to trust me, and like let's do it this way. And if this doesn't work out, then we can pivot and figure something else out. But it's like, if we can't even try it this way, then it's like, why are we here? What are we doing?
This is one thing that like I want to tie what you just said. I, I want to just, I'm gonna rub your back here, glaze you a little bit. You said you go, well, I'm not necessarily like the velocity guru, or, well, I'm not necessarily the guy that really could be speaking about speed. Yo, let's just do a real quick check. You coach an Olympic champ. You have the ultimate pedigree, and you have the ultimate for, like, you should have no athlete coming to you this year and being like, Aaron, do you really think we should be doing this? I would be like, I coach a mother effing Olympic champion. Don't even ask me. Like, you follow the plan and you execute the plan, and that's it. And you're still probably having athletes like, well, should we really do this? Oh my gosh. I was thinking like, so I wanted to share this. It made me think about when we got into mainly when you got into it with the other coach. I was there, but I wasn't. I was more like I was just like, I would be the enforcer on the back. I was just observing and filming, possibly. But when you got into it with the other coach, I was thinking, that coach must have felt like such a moron, and he probably still feels like a moron, especially after what's going on this season in the Diamond League with your guys. Uh, but it's like this never-ending thing now that it's just like, no, that board gets put back in here. We're gonna finish jumping because you have that pedigree now. I don't know if you feel that way, but I feel that way for you. So I hope you have a little bit more
Yeah,
of an edge.
I mean, it's funny because you can ask, Thea about this next time you see her. But there's been years it's like, man, don't let me get a gold medal because nobody can tell me anything. And it's like, that's funny, and I kind of felt like that because it is frustrating, because I used to say this thing that Thea that always would bug her, say it's like, I'm just some guy, like
Yeah,
what do I know, like I'm just some guy. And so like now it's like I'm coach the Olympic champion, world champion, all that stuff. And so like I guess now I'm not just some guy, but at the same time I think people just feel like their opinion is important and it doesn't matter what my accolades are or whatever. Like there's nothing that I can do that's going to force people to just be like, okay, coach, yes sir. Like
yeah. That's true. I mean, also, it is good that you're not the guy who's like, no, you have to do it this way or else. It is like you're not abusing that power, but it is, there still should be a little more in your favor. Like, shut your face.
yeah, man. But I don't know. I don't know. I look at it again. I think what happens sometimes with athletes is they see it as like, oh, this isn't my path, or I'm different, and blah blah blah, whatever. And
Yeah.
I think, yeah, there is individualization for sure, but it's like we're talking about trying to get to the peak of Mount Everest, right?
Right.
And there's a bunch of different pathways. There's pathways that people went on and like literally died and didn't make it. And you're like, okay, we shouldn't do it that way, right? And there might be a few different pathways to get to the top, but like they're all um, converging to one point.
Hmm.
So there's not like tons of different. The closer you get to the top, the more similarities there are in what people are doing than not,
Yes.
right?
Yeah.
And so it's like
100%.
we can't just go. Why are we creating a unbeaten path that we've never done before that might work? Why don't we do what we've seen people do that works, and
Yeah.
maybe make a slight adjustment? But like we don't need to make something new.
Right.
Why would we do that? I've been to the top. I've guided someone to the top.
Yeah. That's good. Just like maybe we meander a little bit off it, but we don't want to waste time. No, that's a really good way to put that. That's and it's funny because it's like when you even when you're in the village or wherever at Worlds, like everybody's doing the same shit. Everybody's still doing the same stuff. Like, yes, there's going to be difference on technique things and how you cue and how you treat and how you interact and stuff, but like pretty much everybody's doing the same key things to get to that point. Yeah, that's a good thing. I did want to bring this up around sports performance because I wanted to tie this. I've had this thought because after watching World Indoors this year and what's the girl's name? Claire. Is it Bryant?
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
but looking at her speed, also I still haven't found speed. I even asked that PJ Vosel guy for speed on Thea if they have that from the Olympics, but I haven't seen any. And if you look at and where I'm going with this is you look at they put up her top speed, her max velocity on the runway, and it was like I remember thinking like if that was a dude in the NFL, they'd run like a 4.5 or a 4.45 or something 40 if they carried that through. She's fast, right? And I'm thinking this with Thea, and I'm going triple jump to me, long jump to me are really good sports to pull from the realm of sports performance. So and I think throwing as well is good, especially in more resisted sports like football. And one thing I wanted to give you to talk about was last year when we had our one guy was prepping for pro day. We had three guys prepping for pro day. I'd send videos to you and you'd say like, yo, posture's bad here or foot position isn't the best here. And I was like just getting started in understanding this stuff. And you gave me so much stuff to think about, like let's say like 5 real key things to think through that now I've spent, maybe 18 months trying to really watch other sprinters, watch your jumpers, watch people that I see in person, and then our football guys, you know, going through and myself with Legend, our speed guy here, and learning so much about speed from you and from, the triple and the long. And I guess I wanted to go tie that into is like, what do you see like a normal strength coach or a normal, like let's say a football coach or a soccer coach could learn, from the jumps? Because even with you, it's like I would send you videos of Tai Chi and you'd say things about like foot pressure and stuff like that. And I don't know if you could expand on anything specifically or if it's just being aware of body position during movement, really.
Yeah, I think there's a large opportunity for team sport athletes to like develop their technique. Like, yeah, there's a lot more variation in kind of their environment as far as like, hey, there's someone running at you, or there's like obstacles that you have to run around and things like that. But I think that because there's not as much of an emphasis on some of the, biomechanics and things like that, is it leads to a lot more injuries, and it's inefficient in general, right? So like, wouldn't you want to be able to train more? So because you're healthier and because you're more efficient, like I think that's really what's kind of like missing. And so I think what's lost is like I remember seeing some football guy post like football guys doing like a standing triple jump or something like that, and they were trying to go like 10 yards, And I was like, I have girls that can do that. And so like, why are we hyping up like guys that are in combine type guys or even NFL guys that can do 10 yards on a standing triple jump when I have women that can do that? Like that's like a bad benchmark.
Mm-hmm.
And similarly, like there might be drills, acceleration or running drills that football guys are doing, and they're like hype because they're just hype in general. But like, hey, you should not benchmark to what a football guy does. You should benchmark to what humans can do. And so if like elite women sprinters can beat your guys, then like you're actually not really training at a high level. And I don't think that they have that perspective, like because I don't know if it's ego or whatever. They just think like, oh, we're the best, we're doing it the best. Like, and it's not true. And it's not about me saying that track is better than football or whatever. It's just like we should be trying to train our guys to have the highest performance possible, and so we should have the right benchmarks. And I just don't think those benchmarks are there because these sports live in their own little bubble.
Yeah. That's. I mean, it's funny because I think about that with Chase Jackson. I think about that a lot. Where I'm like, dude, this chick can, bench press close to 400 pounds. Like our guys should all be benching at least 500 pounds. Like I'm not saying that we have to do that to throw far, but if she can do it, we should be past that benchmark then. Like she's an elite woman. We should be able to go past that. Now, in regards to speed or jumps, who or what sports would you say on the women's side, and I've made this argument before, actually talking about Thea in a couple videos, is like who would you say from a sprint perspective, technique wise, dudes should be learning from, and then maybe on the jump side as well, that these coaches could learn from on the women's side and be like, okay, this is stuff that we could apply as a football coach to a normal kid, let's say.
So you're asking about like examples of like sprinters,
Yeah,
female
technique
sprinters,
wise.
technique wise. That's a good question. I think like Julian Alfred, obviously Olympic champion. I think she's interesting because obviously she's extremely fast, right? But she also has like a build of kind of more like team sport athlete. She's very, very strong, right? And so she's showing you what it looks like to be like have the ultimate level of power. And so she does her acceleration is like really, really good. And it's something that I think that can be replicated by more team sport athletes as opposed to like I think someone like Gabby Thomas, who's also an Olympic champion, who's really good, right? She
Mm-hmm.
has a much like longer, like leaner build. She's more about like top end velocity. Her acceleration is not bad, but I think people aren't going to be able to relate as much to her because she just doesn't have that similar kind of build and that similar type of like strength and power that Julian Alfred has. So I think she's kind of just like a really good example of like how do you kind of push with just so much intensity and aggression. Um, because I don't think any of these football guys that really can hang with her.
Would you think the same thing almost with the jumps? It's like what do you see? I'm just trying to think through. You said, because you mentioned that broad jump, like a double leg triple jump or a broad jump, and I'm trying to think through what would Thea's best broad jump be? Do you know?
Standing broad jump, she can do like 290. So that's 9 feet, maybe like 7 or 8.
Yeah, so we're testing here on site this whole week in the gym, and yeah, here's a good question for you actually. What do you think is the difference? So we have this, or now I think I have a thought process, but we have a kid 44-inch vertical, and he's done 42 and a half on the vertec. He's done 44 on the pad. He has a 9.3 broad jump. And I'm like, how the hell do you have a 9.3 broad and you have a 42 to a 44-inch vert? Like, how is this possible? And I wanted to see. And the interesting thing is he's an Olympic weightlifter. So in my theory, it was like, okay, he's so in tune with like the specific adaptation of force in a vertical aspect. But then Ryan, or our other weightlifter who's good, had a 34 and a half inch vert, but then had a 910 broad. And I'm like, I don't know. I don't know if you've ever seen that consistently where like why someone could have much greater vertical output versus horizontal and what that would be.
Yeah, that's interesting. I would have guessed that you say a guy with a 44-inch vertical would be over 11 feet for sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, you know, not to toot my own horn, I was pretty strong in college. But like
Yo,
I had to
Aaron,
think,
let's say Aaron back squatted like 550 or some stupid crazy thing. What else did you do? You front squatted for like 440 or something insane, weighing like 160 goddamn pounds, and you did like 35 pull-ups, and you could bench press 315, all while weighing like buck 70.
it's a little bit of a exaggeration, but yeah, something like that. But like my vertical was uh like 39, and I could broad jump 11. When I was front squat at 405, I could do, I think I went 11.4 in the broad jump or something like that. And so like I mean I was good at that type of stuff. Like that was like my strength. Um, and I think that like doing front squats and squats in general correlate pretty well to doing broad jump. So it's surprising to see that a guy could go 44 and only go 9. I mean, it might just be a technical issue. So maybe you work with him for a couple weeks and he can jump way farther. I don't know how that's possible. That's really strange to me.
Yeah,
Um, yeah, but like I have a girl who's 5'5" who can broad jump over 10 feet.
that's insane, dude.
And there are a few women that can do that for sure. Like elite long jumpers, there's a few women that can do that for sure, especially if they're taller.
What do you think lacks then if you have a big broad and let's say is it just strictly speed because she's shorter or what?
Uh, excuse me. So yeah, I think that as far as like why is she not jump? Why is she not a world champion if she can
Yeah,
do 10?
yeah, or just maybe not.
Yeah, I think that you have to look at the kind of the time intervals and stuff, right? So if you're doing an actual standing broad jump, you're going to go through way more flexion than you would for a regular long jump, right? Like you can really go down and
Yeah.
spend a bunch of time to generate all of that impulse and take off.
Hmm.
When you're actually doing a long jump, your contact time is going to be like 120 milliseconds or 130 milliseconds, something like that. And so you have to be able to generate, you have way less time to generate a ton of force to take off. And you have to be fast. I think she's really good. And like, she's like almost, world class level. Like she's like right on the cusp of being able to break into, qualifying for worlds and stuff. But I think it's very possible for you to be really good at have a really good vertical, really good broad, and not be fast and not be able to jump well off of 1 foot with speed, because
Because of that.
again,
Yeah.
you don't have that time, and it becomes a lot more elastic than muscular. So that was kind of like my point around, if you have a really good front squat, you probably have a really good broad jump, and that has I think it has a lot less to do with your elasticity and like your connective tissue, and a lot more to do with you could drop down so far and you have so much time to go into it.
And that's why I lift like that actually is better for team sport because there is more time that somebody might have on a football field where they're wearing pads and they're also making contact with somebody. So it's going to be better there, but not necessarily, to a point going back to the resiliency versus performance enhancement in a sport like triple jump.
Yeah.
I have one more thing because we got
Mm-hmm.
about 4 minutes and I talked to you got to I talked to Christoph Kipp this morning because we were just talking physiology and this type of stuff. And I want to pitch this to you because you're literally the person that sparked me on this. You would always talk about uh, Rojas is elastic. She's more elastic. And so I would talk to Christoph then and I'd be like, well, what is Aaron when he says this? Is there any like timeline that would say this is where elasticity would be versus, you know, maybe it elasticity means under point, whatever time, let's say zero point 0.2 seconds.
Mm-hmm.
And where I'm going with this is in the realm of speed or of let's use endurance training. You basically have long, slow distance, and you get an adaptation of greater blood volume. If you're working with high intensity interval training, you're going to increase cardiac output. If you're getting sprint interval training, you're going to increase mitochondrial efficiency. Those are like the three areas, right? That of that you're looking at from the perspective of endurance. Strength, I think you could make the argument you would have max strength, you would have speed strength, and then you would have some type of hypertrophy as like another, like a three-pronged approach to strength versus three-pronged approach to endurance. And where I'm pitching this is I was trying to figure out for explosiveness, if you would say, and this is from you, so you could also say like, this is inspired maybe by you, is the elastic explosiveness would be under 0.2 seconds. And I was struggling with this one, saying being agile, so much more of like a plant and a cut where you have a little bit longer time would be like 0.2 to let's say 0.8. And then from like 0.8 to like a second and a half, I was comparing this would be more of like impulse based, because you would see this typically like a clean could improve that, a front squat could improve that. So it's sort of like the continuum of elastic here. And I know that technically using the term impulse doesn't make sense. I wanted to see and pitch this to you there, your thoughts on that, because I'm trying to clarify it with our guys also, our coaches out there, is like, mainly our guys on site, is like, if we're seeing in an athlete that their elasticity is good but their impulse is good, we know where their explosive reps need to come in the gym.
Yeah. So I think there's two. The way I think about elasticity is there's kind of like maybe two phases of the strength, and so you have, I'll call it like from the initiation to like maximal amortization, and then from amortization to taking off or the release of whatever you're doing. So like what happens is elasticity, I think, almost like by definition, is energy comes in, you store some of that energy, and then you release that energy, right? That's like elastic when you're talking about like physics. And so what's happening here is that there's some type of probably like ground reaction force or force from a bar or something like that that comes in. You store that energy, you have to stop that motion, and then you have to, reinitiate that motion, probably going the opposite direction, right? And so elasticity is not purely just about I'm at a standstill and I create force. That's kind of like the people use that like ballistic. That'd be like more like a med ball throw is more ballistic because you're kind of from a standstill to you launching an object, as opposed to elastic would be is, you jump off of a box, you land, and then you jump again because you store that energy from landing. You have to stop it, and then you have to, use that energy to go and jump again, right? And so at some point, the higher box you go, you're not going to be able to store that energy because it's just like so much. You're just going to crash, right? Mm-hmm. And so there's some optimal height there. So I do think that, yeah, you would have some of these time intervals, but it's not just about the time interval. It's about you have to have some initial energy coming in first for it to really be elastic. Because like, again, I would say, I don't know Rojas and all her training, but like when I talk about her, it's like once she gets going, she's really good at being able to store that energy and keep going, as opposed to like her acceleration being really good, which would be more about starting from nothing and then, doing something. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So like, so one of the things you can do in the weight room, which I think is useful, but is not fully about elasticity, depending on the drill, is you have like you have a time constraint on your time to peak velocity measurement. So you could say like, let's say you're doing like, a bench press off of blocks or something like that. You could say, okay, how long does it take if I only have, 0.2 seconds or 0.3 seconds, how fast can I get the bar in that time interval, right? And that might actually correlate pretty well with like throwing or something. But that's not purely elastic because you're going from a dead stop. What would make it more elastic is if the bar kind of drops and then you have to push it back up. And so you've seen people do stuff like that with like, even sometimes with the bar, but like more with like a medicine ball. You drop a medicine ball on somebody's chest and they push it out. That would be like jumping for your arms. So I see that as like elastic, right? And so you do things in the weight room that have a time constraint and there's some way of storing energy first. So you have to stop that motion and then use that energy to create another motion. That's kind of how I would define it. I know that was
Okay.
very long-winded, but
No, that helps. Okay. All right, Aaron. Thanks for doing the podcast. I'm glad I think this is like 2 years of me talking to you about it, and then we finally got it done. Thanks to Jason.
cool, man.
All right, I will hit you up. Everybody can, share your Instagram handle. We'll put it all over the screen so everybody can stalk you.
Oh, okay.
Young Jumps.
Yeah, Young Jumps. It's pretty simple. It's exactly how you think you'd spell
it. All right. I will see you soon, hopefully.
Yeah, man. Definitely.
Peace.
See ya.